All right, welcome back. This is our first required Supreme Court case, McCulloch versus Maryland. All right, so the context that we want to keep in mind, federalism reflects the dynamic distribution of power between national and state governments. This case is all about that relationship, national and state, how the power gets divided up. All right, so first the facts of the case. Several states, one of which was Maryland, and they're going to be the one involved in this particular lawsuit, they passed laws to tax the Bank of the United States. So Congress had created a national bank, the Bank of the United States, and it had branches within several states, and they decided, hey, we're going to make that national bank pay taxes. So the constitutional issues that are raised here include essentially two questions the Supreme Court is going to consider. First, did Congress have the authority to establish a national bank? So the first question is, were they even allowed to make the bank in the first place? Once they've dealt with that question, they would then deal with, and obviously they'd only answer this question if they decided Congress did indeed have the authority to establish a national bank. But the second question then becomes, could individual states tax a national bank operating within their borders? So if they are allowed to have the national bank, can Maryland tax it if they so desire? So those are two constitutional issues. The holding, meaning the ruling that the Supreme Court issued in this case, they answered both questions. They said, yes, Congress may establish a national bank. States may not tax the national government. So yes, Congress can create a national bank. No, states cannot tax the national government. So why did they rule this way? So there are constitutional principles that they used to support their decision. So dealing with the first question immediately is, could Congress create a national bank? And they said yes. And the reason is this first bullet point. As a result of the necessary and proper clause, Congress has implied powers and is not limited by its expressed powers, meaning that Congress can go beyond what is directly stated, expressed, enumerated in the Constitution. Because of the necessary and proper clause, they have implied powers, therefore they can make laws and do things beyond what the Constitution specifically enumerates or expresses that they may do. As regards the second issue of whether or not states can tax the national government, they said that the Supremacy Clause asserts that the national government is superior to state governments. So when there is a conflict between the two, between state and national governments, the Supremacy Clause says the national government's laws and constitution is supreme or superior to that of the states. So this is a total victory for the national government in both ways. It expands congressional power and it reaffirms the Supremacy Clause within the Constitution. All right, so the rest of the video we're going to look at a few quotes from the majority opinion to see the reasoning behind this. So this is kind of giving you the overall idea of how the court, in this case Marshall, interprets the necessary and proper clause. He says, let the end or the purpose be legitimate. Let it be within the scope of the Constitution, but consistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. And he says that laws like that are constitutional. So notice there he's talking about the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. So this is where we get back to that idea that, well, the necessary and proper clause says Congress can do things that aren't directly expressed as long as it relates to their enumerated or expressed powers. So that would be the spirit of the Constitution. So because Congress is expressly allowed to coin money, to borrow money, to tax, then within the spirit of that, it would be reasonable that it's necessary for them to have a national bank in order to carry out those functions. So you can see here, by saying spirit of the Constitution, this is going to expand congressional power. Another quote here, he admits this, well, I kind of jumped ahead of myself with that last one, but he admits that national bank is not part of their expressed or enumerated powers. But here's an important thing. He says there's nothing in the Commerce Clause, or not the Commerce, sorry, the Necessary and Proper Clause or Article 1, Section 8, like in the Articles of Confederation, which exclude implied powers. and require that everything be expressly described. So what he's saying here, because if you recall, in the Articles of Confederation, it said that if you think about like comparing the 10th Amendment of the Constitution to the Articles said that everything not expressly delegated to the federal belonged to the states. In the 10th Amendment, it doesn't say that. It says everything not delegated to the federal belongs to the states. That's a major difference because he's essentially saying here there are implied powers. Every single thing that Congress can do does not need to be expressly stated. So here you see the Supreme Court's interpretation of not only Article and Section 8, but the 10th Amendment as well. And you see a good contrast between the 10th Amendment and the Articles here. And now this is regarding the second part. The power to tax involves the power to destroy, and state governments have no right to tax or potentially destroy the federal government. So again, this is showing that supremacy clause being of chief importance here. All right, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button if this video helped you in any way at all. I really appreciate it. This has been a La Money production.